Hey guys, Zeteo here. Today we're going to be doing some more Alpha Cup casting. We're getting towards the end of this tournament. We're going to be casting the losers bracket semifinals between Autopilot and Yanami. Yanami, also known as Zeteo. And the winner of this will move on to face Blodir in the losers bracket finals. Blodir, a very formidable opponent, actually took down both these players, knocked them both down to this losers bracket. And, we should have a pretty good game here. Zeteo, of course, a very formidable opponent. Autopilot, maybe in the past wasn't quite so strong, but it's certainly very strong nowadays. So this should be a rather good match. Let's get into it.
Game started.
So we got our blue player, Autopilot, spawned at the bottom right as our Cortex player. And at the top left, we have Yanami spawned as our red Armada player. So the colors are actually switched. Cortex is actually the blue player, and Armada is actually the red player. This is our Arksum Cats Valley. I always want to say that wrong, but hopefully I'm saying it correct today. And we got Zeteo. I guess, this is a map where, initially you're starting down this hill. It's quite easy to defend, all these different locations leading up to that hill. And it is a pretty wide open map, so we should see a bit of a macro game here in our first game. Both players just adding on, the usual stuff, building on some mechs and wind turbines, but it looks like Autopilot actually going to be going for a vehicle lab here. That's pretty common for a Cortex player to do these days. Pawns do pretty well against grunts with the currents patch. We'll see how this sizes up. Pawns against incisors. Both players going to be able to build some scouts, some ticks to roam the map and look for, damage they can find. But of course, like I said, this is a bit of a macro map, and, the scouts aren't really going to be able to do too much damage, probably. It's a little bit easier to defend, so we'll just have to wait and see how this plays out. Ticks are a little bit stronger than rovers and rascals, so they have a little bit more micro ability to them. They can kind of swoop in, and while the scouts like slow turret is like turning around to face the tick is just running in circles and dealing damage. So certainly that can and probably will come into factor here. Zeteo now adding on a pretty early construction turret, but again, this is a bit of a macro map. There are a lot of rocks to reclaim as well, so with that and the wind speed being quite high, this is a pretty good idea to do on this map. But we'll have to wait and see if Autopilot throws down a lot of aggression with some rascals here. Second con coming out for Autopilots, just grabbing expansions with them, leaving the commander back at the base to assist the lab, also produce some wins as needed. And yeah, both players just kind of out roaming the map with their respective scouts. We got rascals at the top and bottom. We have a single tick going through the center from Zeteo here, and then just a lot of ticks for defense, and so far just one rascal for defense for Autopilot. Zeteo now moving his commander out of his base. Metal starts drying up a little bit. You do have this concert to, help produce units at a pretty good rate. You can send your commander out, assuming that you're spending all your money on your lab as it is. Having a commander out to expand a little quicker is quite nice. That's 300 build power, compared to 80 from your constructors. So, this will certainly, help him expand rather quickly. There is a rascal here in the back of Zeteo's base, but looks like these ticks, in hot pursuit, going to take that out. Another rascal at the bottom here, going for this resbot. Commander is right here. It could pick off this the rascal if. Oh, okay, that was very unfortunate. So the rascal was actually staying in between the resbot and the commander, which I believe made it so that the commander could not shoot over the resbot at the rascal. So the rascal was able to close that gap, get really close, and take out that resbot, despite the commander being right there. So in case you're wondering how that even happens, that is how it happens. But we do have a couple of cons out here now as well. So it's a commander and two constructors out expanding. Another, Lazarus has been made, going to be able to pick up his buddy that fell, and then, continue on reclaiming and resurrecting fallen soldiers. Meanwhile, on the other side of the map, we do have a couple of pawns. They run directly into these incisors, and these incisors are going to be able to pick them off pretty cleanly here. This is a damaged rascal, or sorry, a damaged incisor. But if it's repaired, it can certainly, do some nice damage and, absorb a lot of damage still. So no actual damage done, to these incisors with that in mind, if it is repaired. Units do have a bit of an auto heal after, some time has passed. They'll start regenerating their health slowly. And we'll just have to see if this incisor is, able to get some health back or not, as this game kind of slows down a little bit. But yeah, as the vehicle player, you kind of need to be rather defensive with your incisors. Sending them across the map, this early on can often mean that pawns and ticks get into your base a lot more easily. So you're gonna have to autopilot here. Just gonna have to wait, for enough incisors to come out to be able to attack as well as defend with. Has moved the commander out of the base. Does have 4 cons. I didn't select all of them. So there's 4 cons there assisting the lab. So still, using that middle, quite nicely. And yeah, I mean, I guess with this, there was that earlier move out from Yudi here. So, sitting pretty good with the economy, or at least a little bit ahead for it. But yeah, as both commanders are out expanding, and constructors are out expanding. It looks like 2 constructors going to be expanding for autopilot with that commander, and Chisato, has 2 constructors out and the commander as well, and probably going to be adding on another one in due time. Looks like this mech is threatened by these 2 rascals that have gotten up to this top left location. Scout, they see where the where the constructor is. They see there's a turret there already, and they see the radar going up. So, with that radar, of course, very, very important. Need to be able to see what's coming down this side so that you can respond to it, with enough time to take it out before it deals any real damage. Meanwhile, Autopilot's produced quite a few incisors here. He now has enough to maybe go across the map a little bit. It looks like he's actually sending all of them across the map that way. Just going to be responding to this pawn, or a couple of pawns, I should say, in the meantime, but probably going to be moving the majority of them, up towards the center here. Meanwhile, there is a pawn roaming around, maybe going to find this constructor in a moment, and there's no incisors nearby. So this is certainly probably going to be some damage, but at the same time, this is a sizable force from Autopilot. He also has these 5 tanks at the top here, and right now, Yanami knows about it. He's responding to it. The constructor is being targeted down, focus fired, and it's taken out. Certainly a big deal. But yeah, you're certainly trading damage on that constructor instead of these pawns. So these pawns might be able to clean this up, or at the very least push it back. And that is a lot of incisor wrecks there. But at the same time, I'm not sure Chisato knows about these other incisors coming up to this location. And now with all those combines, they can certainly, take out this position and continue forward, maybe up towards the base, do some damage. Meanwhile, back at this other location, the vehicle con was saved. It has taken a lot of damage, but these incisors, that have been popping out, let's see, he probably has a radar somewhere. Yeah, he has a radar up here to see that coming a little bit. Had a really quick response there. Meanwhile, looks like this rascal picks off another constructor, and the incisors are still moving up to this base. So this is going to be very tricky for Chisato to deal with. Even a self-D on the LT here, trying to get some damage on the incisors, but the incisors too smart. Back away, and the self-D is going to be canceled. But yeah, both these players very, very smart with that. Know to be very careful with how they attack an LT. And Autopilot, backing away and then coming back, certainly has helped him take it out without taking damage from the self-D. Plenty of pawns out now. It looks like Autopilot has decided just to take his win and then get these incisors out, or at least like park them somewhere where it's a little bit harder for Chisato to deal with them. And they're also, I want to point out, they're also like kind of facing away from the pawns, which allows them to back away, and abuse their extra range a bit. Allows them to get some extra hits off and deal some more damage, making it a much better trade for you. But yeah, On this bottom side, we also have some more incisors coming forward, and I think this is just a lot of pressure going down on Chisato. You know, he tries to self-D another LLT, no dice, gets picked off too early. This other LLT gets taken out as well, and these incisors are certainly pressuring this bottom location. There's, you know, his commander is there, but it's all the way back here and unable to, you know, defend this location. Pawns coming in, but at the same time, the incisors are already on top of some of these mexes, taking out LLTs, and, you know, I think Yudi's gonna, you know, at the very least lose this position here, and then we'll have to just wait and see if they run into the commander and get degunned, or if they, you know, get out and survive. Meanwhile, there was a bit of engagement going on over here, but I think it was basically just to back out with those incisors. You know, meanwhile, the commander here, you know, runs into the incisors, no degun, no energy available for the degun. And, you know, for now, it looks like a couple of those incisors are going to live. Meanwhile, back at the top right, there is that engagement happening now. You know, and so far, it looks pretty good for Chisato. You know, he's able to take out those incisors, you know, with those pawns. And again, you know, these wrecks are on Chisato's side. So, you know, it's certainly going to be able to pick those up, assuming that, you know, Autopilot doesn't do so first with this constructor. There is a pawn still roaming around, but can't really engage this constructor. There's an exploiter on this mechs. There's some LTs here. Probably just going to run into these LTs and die, unfortunately, but that's the way it goes. Meanwhile, in the center of the map, we do see a lot of pawns from Chisato moving forward. Takes out that exploiter. 2 cons are being taken out. That's certainly a big deal. There's another exploiter and some incisors coming up for the defense, but you know, these pawns, you know, being used pretty wisely, avoiding the exploiter. You know, you don't want to fight that exploiter as these tanks roll in, because the exploiter is certainly going to absorb a lot of that damage from the incisors as that goes down. Meanwhile, at the top, there are some more incisors engaging with these turrets. Takes out a con, and, you know, these players just trading blows. Meanwhile, there was, you know, an air plant that went down for Autopilot, and now these shurikens are out. You know, that's certainly one of the nice things about being Cortex. You can, you know, build those shurikens. Sorry, I accidentally hit the mic. These shurikens can, you know, stun these pawns, and then make it really easy for these incisors to take perfect engagements with them. Plenty of incisors up here for defense, but, you know, a mech was taken out. As, you know, these players are trading blows. I think Autopilot's in a slightly better position here. And certainly, you know, if you know, Chisato's unable to deal enough damage back without leaving a bunch of wrecks behind, you know, I think Autopilot's going to be in a good position here. Yeah, Autopilot still has incisors roaming around, you know, near Chisato's base, and, you know, he's, you know, Chisato's also got to deal with that. And then with the shurikens coming up here, you know, he can stun this army and make it so that all these incisors are just, you know, take out those pawns for free. You know, there's still a lot of stuff going around on the map. As this con is being threatened and taken out. Meanwhile, the incisors are trying to move up this ramp, but a really nice defense set up here, you know, from Chisato. And then the shurikens just kind of out of position. They're kind of stuck, you know, maybe on a fight command or something, you know, and targeting this one pawn and this one mech instead of helping the incisors out. So, you know, Chisato taking a nice engagement there, despite the shurikens being present, but he does have to worry about all these incisors coming up here. There's certainly a lot of them. I don't know if there's enough pawns to deal with that. And at the same time, I don't know if... okay, so there is an air lab. I just haven't seen any air units come out. No fighters as of yet. But there is certainly plenty of shurikens out here for now. And I think Chisato deciding to go with more pawns, you know, to deal with the ground forces, just kind of making that a priority. You know, and he's got to be really careful here. Oh, okay. So my apologies. This is a fighter now for Chisato. So no more shurikens at the moment. And it looks like, yeah, these fighters now circling back to take out these scouts that are in his base. But yeah, it's certainly a nice, you know, getting a little bit of extra vision for a little while. You know, maybe your opponent doesn't quite notice that they're there. Maybe they don't quite have enough anti-air to deal with that. So, you know, just a little bit of extra information, you know, after the scouts already saw the base, it's kind of nice to have. But yeah, we do see a transition into, you know, into a lot of pounders here for Autopilot, and certainly pawns do not do well with pounders whatsoever, but the pounders are kind of slow. They kind of need to get into position to be meaningful. And I think, you know, with all this pressure going down from Autopilot, I think it's going to be really hard for Chisato to, you know, run around those pounders. I think those pounders are going to have plenty of time to get into meaningful positions in the center of the map, for example. Excuse me. There's a single bomber that's pointed out here at the top left, coming in, actually just going for mexes, just being some light harass. Nothing too crazy, not like, investing a lot into bombers, but that certainly is throwing down some pressure, and maybe, that forces Chisato to make, more fighters to deal with it. The bomber does go for the base, gets taken out by fighters though. And it explodes on. All right, so when aircraft die, they fall from the sky and land somewhere and explode. It so happened that bomber exploded on a cluster of converters, setting them off, exploding the whole stack. And it's not like the biggest of damage, but it's also kind of annoying to lose that, because that is a bit of extra metal coming in, that you no longer have. So. Excuse me as I catch my breath a little bit. But yeah, we see a bit of an air battle here. But I think Autopilot certainly has a few extra fighters out here. But it's also over the territory of Chisato, so he has a little bit better vision. Maybe he's able to position his fighters, to take slightly better engagements. But yeah, it looked like that actually was just more or less an even trade, with Chisato just having more fighters out, that were able to survive here. But yeah, they're still kind of going at it. Some shurikens show up, gonna pressure this location. There is a fighter in that region to take that out. T2, I totally missed the T2 transition, but there are some Jags now on the field, and these Jags certainly can do pretty well against T1. In terms of versus medium tanks, they're just like maybe slightly better. They're a little bit more expensive than these medium tanks. But he's got to be careful, because this, he doesn't have enough Jags out here to really defend this at the moment. Meanwhile, there is a big medium tank push in the center here, and if these tanks all join forces, this is certainly going to be a lot for just a few Jags to handle. But yeah, Chisato certainly going to be hurting here a bit. He's a little bit lower on mexes. Wasn't able to secure this location, this area here. I just see a lot of empty mexes. And that's allowing Autopilot to just produce a lot of units. Autopilot also, gearing up to do T2. It's produced, a sizable amount of medium tanks to lay down pressure, and this is allowing him to safely get T2, start getting up that economy, and catch up to Chisato's, T2 economy. Not that he's all that behind on economy. It's just the, in terms of T2 unit count, or T2 mex count, I should say. Chisato with the faster T2 is probably a bit ahead with that. Let's actually count it. It looks like just now adding on the fifth mex, the fifth upgraded mex, and also grabbing the T2 Geo. But yeah, Autopilot looking like, let's see. Okay, so I don't see any upgraded mexes, just going straight for the Geo here. Which I find kind of surprising. I would think that you'd want to, upgrade some mexes first, assuming that your energy's in pretty good order. But yeah, this is still a lot of medium tanks for Chisato to handle. They're coming up the ramp now. Jaguar's coming up from behind to try to deal with it, but it's kind of hard to catch up to these units, from behind. And that means, all these units, pushing forward to have a little bit more range, are able to take, a little bit better of an engagement for it. And there isn't enough out here. There's a bull out here now. It looks like Chisato's trying to block with the APHIS block here. But these medium tanks are getting into the base, doing massive amounts of damage. See this wind farm. Turbines converters go down. More damage on the wind turbines, but at the same time, the Geo is up and running, so this may seem like a lot of damage. It would have been a little bit ago, but the Geo is done, so he can afford to lose a little energy at the moment, and even has a little bit extra for converting. But yeah, these medium tanks are going to be taken out, and I think this just kind of, it kind of gives some back to Chisato. There are all these wrecks now in his base. He can either reclaim them if he wants to, put that metal towards T2, or if he wants, he can resurrect them and just get more medium tanks. But yeah, there's certainly some more medium tanks out now coming across the field. There's a T2 constructor here that could be threatened. That certainly would be a sizable takedown to take down the T2 constructor as well as the console. But yeah, it looks like, these medium tanks, pounders with this group as well aren't going to deal with something like a bull as easily. Pounders have too short a range for that. So, Autopilot's going to have to back out for now. But looking at the big picture, still having, complete and utter, map dominance here. With Chisato only able to control this little bit of territory. I think, the T2 transition just kind of leaves too much opportunity for your opponent to strike if you don't have enough units out, to do such a transition. And then once you do a transition, it's like, okay, you don't want to produce something as heavy as a bull as your first few units because it's just hard for you to produce enough of them to defend all those different locations. Medium tanks can certainly just bypass it, go somewhere else instead. So you kind of need something like Jags, but Jags don't trade as they trade a little bit more evenly with the medium tanks. And so it's just kind of hard to deal with so many medium tanks running towards you that early on in T2. But yeah, so far, Autopilot mixing in a lot of Tigers already, actually. So yeah, a lot of Tigers. Definitely has a bunch of T2 mexes upgraded at this point. We're looking at sorry, I'm looking at the count here. 13 T2 mexes. Some of them probably still being built, and then we're looking at 12 for Chisato. So yeah, certainly, it's not only the territory that Autopilot has kept here and put mexes on, but also a little bit ahead in terms of economy here, or in terms of T2 economy. Yeah, we see the numbers jump around a bit as Chisato eats some of those corpses left behind in his base, but we do see a lot of Tigers out here, and that's going to be rather tricky to deal with. Tigers are a lot cheaper than bulls, which means you can have more of them out, which means you can spread them out to various locations and just kind of avoid bulls as much as possible. Looks like this bull gets picked off here, but there's another one for defense. But yeah, assuming that Autopilot plays this carefully, doesn't take too bad of an engagement, this is going to be more Tigers pushing forward here, putting more pressure on. Meanwhile, there are a bunch of Jaguars coming down on the left-hand side. Certainly going to be threatening some of these exploiters. He certainly needs to do something like that to, get Chisato, or to get Autopilot out of his territory. And yeah, just T2 units or T2 constructors moving around to continue expanding. Yeah, we do have a lot of Tigers on the left-hand side as well. But these are certainly looking like they're going to be going up the ramp towards the commander. We'll see if they get degunned, see if they're paying attention, and maybe moving the Tigers elsewhere. And then yeah, these Tigers in the center certainly doing, trying to do some damage. But it looks like the ticks have come online, and with that spam, okay, so some deguns go down, some Tigers go down, but yeah, some splitting as well. So a couple of those Tigers are alive still. But yeah, with the tick reinforcements, it becomes a problem for Autopilot to continue this engagement, because now he needs to, focus fire the bulls, or, just do it very carefully where he's able to, to take the ticks out first, to minimize the amount of damage that he's taking from the bulls. But yeah, looking at how the income is settling, settling around, 60, I think it was 70 just a minute ago for Autopilot. Certainly 70% is a lot of extra income to have, especially when you have these, these cheaper units that are able to, spread out a little bit more and be in more places, can lay down a lot more pressure than the bulls can. The bulls a bit more of a a force that you want to group together and have a bigger, stronger frontal push of some sort. And we say that Chisato does have 3 on the left-hand side here. Could potentially, deal some damage here. He does have some ticks out. He sees that there's Tigers coming forward along this avenue, so probably going to need to send his bulls over to defend, or maybe decides to just reinforce it with units popping out. Meanwhile, at the top left here, or top center, I should say, some bulls are trading with some Tigers, and the bulls are doing a nice job backing out. and not all these tigers are firing. So it's some nice extra damage out of these bulls. You know, the bulls with slightly more hit points, or slightly more range, I should say, than those tigers. Banishers starting to come out now, though. Banishers certainly can deal with bulls a lot better than tigers can, and you know, I think it's going to come down to like how this goes down with all these ticks on the field. You know, all the ticks on the field, like if they're well spread out, can certainly draw a lot of fire. You know, allowing the bulls to you know, deal more damage. And yeah, actually, it looks like up here, you know, Zeteo doing an excellent job, you know, with these tigers. You know, making sure that he's backing up and not taking extra fire. Losing a couple ticks for free, but, you know, honestly, like, that's oftentimes not a huge deal. And yeah, both these players now, their T2 expansions are all the way up here for Autopilot. You know, all the way, you know, so in terms of T2, it's like all of this is T2, or most of it is T2. You know, and you know, that's certainly going to put, you know, continue putting a lot of financial pressure on Zeteo here. You know, Zeteo does have a bunch of T2s, 2 mexes, you know, up to this line, but, you know, it's not as much as Autopilot here. I will say, though, you know, we do see some air transitions going down. We do have a T2 air lab from Autopilot building those T2 fighters. Again, they're stealthy, so they don't show up on radar. Meanwhile, over here, let's see, no T2 air lab. We do have a regular air lab, though. So it is producing some fighters, but, you know, maybe it's not enough to deal with T2 fighters if Autopilot keeps adding them on. But both players, you know, will have to feel each other out, you know, to see if, you know, if there's enough air to defend against something like a bombing run. You know, and I'm unsure if Zeteo would suspect that there's T2 air at this point in time. We see a pit pull for defense. You know, obviously it's not enough on its own, but it is a you know, pretty strong defense. But there is a lot of tigers. The tigers take it out. This bull now under attack as well. And yeah, actually the bull's going to go down. So this position, actually there is another pit bull here that I missed. So those tigers are going to be shooed away a little bit with that in mind. And then yeah, the expansions keep popping up here for Autopilot on that top side. And yeah, we'll see what is Autopilot doing to try to close this game out. Looks like for now, just you know, sitting with you know, the T2, you know, vehicle lab and the T2 air lab, just producing fighters for air defense and producing tigers. So you know, I suppose you kind of need to size up your opponent and see how their air is, you know, and try to find what is weakest. Is their air the weakest, or is their ground the weakest? And right now, Autopilot has time, can kind of, you know, take the time to consider what should happen here. And also, you know, to keep in mind, you know, Banshees can, or I should say Banishers, can hit air. So that, you know, these being in this position with the fighters coming overhead, you know, the Banishers can pick off a few fighters as well. So, you know, we'll just have to wait and see how this plays out. So far, both players a little bit reluctant to, you know, fight each other in terms of air. And the ground stuff is mostly just stabilizing a bit here, right? Plenty of bulls on this left-hand side. Not enough tigers to deal with this for sure. So, you know, we'll see if Zeteo keeps pressing forward here. He could certainly take out this position, you know, if nothing comes over to help reinforce it. You know, meanwhile, in the center of the map, we do have a lot of tigers, you know, a lot of ticks, not as many bulls here. So I think, you know, with that, it's going to be really easy for you know, Autopilot to kind of hold that position. I say that, but there are some Starlights out. There are Banishers over there too, so it is a bit more of a complex fight. I'm not sure what people are talking about. I have that turned off at the moment, so I apologize for all the you know, chat sounds pinging up here. I should have maybe minimized that, but but yeah. Anyway, we do have a lot of tigers. This is a lot of tigers being produced from Autopilot. I guess their spending on infrastructure for T2 has slowed down a bit. We don't see any fusions. You know, not necessary. He has plenty of wins. You know, he does have the Geo, so or actually, we do see a fusion going down in the back here. But, you know, certainly not paying as much on you know, T2 mexes at the moment, since he's kind of gathered them all, or upgraded them all, I should say. And so, yeah, this is turning into more of a stalemate as these players build up their you know, tank forces. It becomes more and more difficult to attack in there, especially when defenses start going up, like these scorpions, like the pit bulls, you know, like this, you know, bulwark here. And, you know, you also, of course, have the, you know, the banishers. I had a brain fart. I was like, is it called the Banisher? Yes, it's called the Banisher. Yeah, Banishers and Starlights are out as well to make it a bit more complex. Air Scout goes down. He sees the fighter count. You know, those radar planes, you know, do have radar, can see a little bit further. And these are T1 fighters primarily. So he has a pretty good idea of what the fighter count is. And, you know, with the T2, you know, fighters out here, he might be looking at that and saying, okay, you know, maybe there's a good opportunity for me to do some kind of airplay. Looks like still just producing fighters, maybe adding on another, you know, air scout or radar plane, I should say. And, you know, we'll just have to wait and see if he decides to do a bombing run or not. We don't have a, you know, an atomic bomber for our Cortex player, you know, so that's kind of off the, you know, not something you can do. Dragon can certainly be helpful, but, you know, the damage is much slower. You know, they're not this big alpha damage kind of unit, so, you know, it makes it a little bit easier for the other player to respond to it. Yeah, I would be curious to know. Okay, we do have a T2 air lab out here for Chisato. You know, he does have the possibility to do atomic bombers. For now, you know, definitely needs to up his air game in terms of fighters. And yeah, I mean, he's certainly a little bit behind, but it's hard for him to know that. I feel like he could certainly benefit from having, you know, some kind of radar plane go over and scout all that. But it is a lot harder, again, because these T2 fighters are stealthy. But yeah, while I say all that, there is a lot of engaging going on in the center here. Chisato pushed forward, but, you know, runs into all these defenses, runs into these scorpions, and, you know, it just doesn't go as well. You know, he probably thought that he might have enough for that, but, you know, with all the static defense, like, is actually sitting in bad shape after that. The Tigers move forward in this position as well, and I don't see any proper resistance. You know, these units coming up from the center, these units coming in from the left. There just isn't enough out here for Chisato. You know, largely in part because of the mech scout. You know, just kind of falling behind and staying behind for a little while here, so that income difference, you know, certainly playing into Autopilot's favor at the moment. And yeah, we do have an atomic bomber that was made. You know, is going to be able to you know, deal some nice damage to these Tigers. These Tigers forced back, and I guess this game's going to continue. Air units coming in here to defend. You know, I think Autopilot in a better, you know, air dominating position, but the atomic bomber may be doing enough damage for now to you know, keep it all at bay. Yeah, certainly after all those fighters, you know, coming in here taking out his opponent like that, you know, he could very well switch into bombers. It looks like he's switching into wasps, which are T2 gunships. You know, they don't deal a ton of damage, but they certainly can be annoying, and they certainly do some AoE damage. So, you know, when units are clustered, you know, they can certainly be a really, really good choice. Meanwhile, Ambassador's coming online for Chisato. You know, maybe looking to take out some of the static defenses. You know, if possible. But the forces for Autopilot are just kind of overwhelming at this point. You know, even adding on some rascals here to absorb some damage, and scouting, seeing what, you know, how many bulls are out here and whatnot. And yeah, on this left-hand side, we have some Tigers moving up. We've got Tigers on the top side as well as the middle, you know, position, being threatened with all these grunts and rascals and whatnot. You know, and I think that's certainly a really strong move here, because, you know, bulls and starlights don't do so well against these, you know, masses of or these, you know, this spam, this grunt and rascal spam. You know, they're able to get the flanking damage off and surround those bulls and ambassadors and whatnot. So I think Autopilot here has made some really good decisions here, was biding his time on the left and the top, and you know, has a certain force in the middle, but then switches it. All of a sudden switches it, and now, you know, Autopilot's, or I should say, Chisato's army, not quite the army that you need to deal with that switch. So yeah, I think this is going to be closing out here pretty soon, because, you know, I don't think there's much left for for Chisato to do about it. You know, what do you even do to you know, win the game from here as Chisato? I'm looking at the economy. It looks like Chisato tried to rely on a lot of converting with fusions, you know, since he doesn't have as many mexes. But yeah, that is a lot of extra cost. It's really hard to do that. You know, meanwhile, Autopilot, you know, just added on a couple of fusions, you know, just now seizing the moments, you know, seeing that he's ahead and so far pushed so far forward. He's just like kind of making sure that he guarantees the win. You know, in case this attack doesn't just end the game, he has some extra economy to fall back on. And GG is called. Chisato taps out. But yeah, very, very well played by both players. Certainly from Autopilot, that switch at the end,
Battle
you know, certainly, you know, helped close that game out a bit sooner. And then, yeah, just being, you know, just doing something really smart. And it's like, once you take that nice advance, just being really careful, not just like running straight for the base, but like being careful about it. And, you know, taking, you know, building some aphises in the back, you know, in the meantime, so that your economy grows even further as, you know, as you take that good position and have those units to, you know, rely on for defending. Like, you don't have to worry about it, you know, someone attacking you because their base is you know, being threatened in such a big way. Whew, what a game. We're going to go into our second game here. Yeah, this one. So the winner of the series will move up to the losers final, and they will be able to face the winner of, you know, the winners bracket semifinals. Or I'm sorry, the loser of the winners bracket semifinals. I don't know if I said that correctly the first time. But that would be Blodier. And once again, Blodier has taken out both these players in the winners bracket. So certainly that'll be, you know, if it's auto, or, you know, either way, it's going to be, you know, a comeback story if, you know, or it'd be a potential redemption story, I should say, for one of these players, you know, as they go up in to the losers finals. And then the winner of that will be facing off against X Factor in the grand finals. Okay. All right, so let's get our second game started here.
Game started.
All right, so we got Autopilot spawned at the bottom center as our Armada player, blue player, I should say. And we got Chisato spawned at the top center as our red Armada player. Very Armada favored here so far. But yeah, this is Crystallized Plains. This is a bit of a smaller map. The distance to your opponent is not that long, especially since, you know, players basically always spawn in these positions. It's just a better position. The 5 mechs is certainly a better deal than doing 2 mexes that provide less than 5. So, you know, that's really the only option if you want a good start, unless you're trying to do something cheesy and throw your opponent off guard by, you know, doing something in a different position. But yeah, both players are Armada. I would expect both players to be doing a Resbot opener here. Actually, no, it looks like a tick first from Chisato here. But yeah, there is going to be a Resbot in the queue after these first few ticks, it looks like. And then, yeah, so the Resbot out first, I think, for Autopilot is, you know, going to help him out a little bit here. It takes a little bit of time for those ticks to get across the map. First con is produced actually before defending ticks, and that just kind of goes to show you that, you know, there is that finite time that it takes to get across the map that you don't really need to defend. You know, Resbot into con and then finally defending ticks is just fine. You know, sends the tick forward, sees these ticks coming down the line, and has enough out to defend. However, if this, okay, I was gonna say, if that tick gets picked off, you know, that Resbot could be threatened, but the Resbot does reclaim that tick. So, you know, and reclaiming, of course, returns that money to you. So, you know, it was a tick is $21 right now. You know, so Autopilot actually just gained 21 metal, reclaiming that tick. But yeah, a little bit behind for Chisato here, since you know, well, first of all, the Resbot was, you know, out a little bit later, but secondly, doesn't have a con out yet. So it's really up to Chisato to threaten Autopilot here and hopefully take out that con. And if he does not, he's certainly going to be hurting as he gets further and further behind on economy. But yeah, some pawns are coming out. Autopilot, you know, with those scouts, you know, ahead, knows where the pawns are, sees what's coming towards him. So he, you know, has switched into pawns himself, and now going to be able to defend these locations pretty well. And I think the window of opportunity for Chisato is dropping very, very quickly here, especially if these pawns are taken out. Yeah, those pawns are not only taken out, but they're taken out without even killing a pawn. You know, doesn't really return damage. And if these pawns come back and get repaired, like that's damage that's just gone now. You know, a living pawn is certainly much better than a dead pawn, even if it does have a lot less health left at the moment. So yeah, regardless of if it gets repaired or not, it'll certainly do a lot of damage, or potentially some damage. There is a pawn on the back here still trying to, you know, find another con, but no dice. No cons are found on that right-hand side. Or I'm sorry, the left-hand side. The con instead is on the left-hand side. This is pretty typical. The first con comes here, and then, you know, builds a radar up here, and then circles back to get these mechs over here on the right. But yeah, it looks like Chisato, you know, sees what's going on, or you know, realizes that he hasn't built a con yet and can't really do that damage back. And so in response, to catch up, has built on 2 cons here, and it's gonna really be up to you know, Autopilot to you know, attack that. You know, Chisato, you know, feigning some pressure here, sending some pawns forward, you know, trying to keep Autopilot back at his base and hopefully not threaten these expansions that are a little bit more naked. But, you know, as it so happens, Autopilot's already sent some units out, you know, are threatening this location. There's no radar to see him ahead of time. Like, I'm sure they ran in here, you know, so, you know, the response time's a little bit slow, and these pawns, you know, take out the con. The con's gone, and the mechs is gone, and, you know, still not that many units out to defend against them. You know, meanwhile, there's that attack at the bottom, but also, you know, that threat at the left side of Chisato's base. Not able to really do too much, just kind of get taken out. Bit of a smaller force here, but these 3 units are still roaming around. Looks like they are met with plenty of resistance now that, you know, some more pawns have been added on. Meanwhile, on the other side of things, Autopilot has cleaned up those pawns in his, you know, that were closing in on his base, and the con is still alive. It's still out there ticking, moving on to that, you know, bottom right side to expand. Meanwhile, there is a resurrection bot that's, you know, being threatened here, and there's no response. There's nothing that's Chisato has to you know, deal with this. You know, so that just gets taken out for free. And now these pawns are, you know, if he wants to, he can just kind of camp them in this location, wait for the con to come out towards him, make it hard for you know, to Chisato to remember that there's pawns over there, or he can move them forward, you know, try to pressure that con, but there is that turret there, so I think that'll work out a little bit better for Chisato. And yeah, I mean, it looks like Autopilot trying to come in here, trying to do some damage, but no dice so far, you know, and just has to back out. And certainly right now, you know, there's a lot of damaged pawns for Chisato. I feel like repair would certainly help him out with that idle res bot. You know, could be doing a little bit more. Looks like those pawns are in fact cleaned up by that LT. And yeah, I think we're stabilized a little bit for now. But, you know, both players, you know, certainly gearing up to, you know, expand a little bit more rapidly here as it becomes harder and harder to lay down pressure on your opponent. So there's 3 cons out here for Autopilot now, expanding. And, you know, in terms of what Chisato's doing, he also has, you know, 2 cons out. You know, third con, the con that was over here was picked off, I believe. Yeah, there's a wreck right here. He's going to be just picking that guy up to continue on to expand. We'll soon have those 3 cons out. But yeah, a lot of wrecks over on Chisato's side. So, you know, with that, going to be able to maybe field a slightly bigger army, or maybe an equal army, since Chisato, or I'm sorry, since Autopilot, you know, has had those expansions for a little bit longer. Whew, my throat's certainly getting a little dry, and certainly a little tired at the moment. So I hope you guys can bear with me a bit. The last game was certainly a long one, but this is Crystallized Plains. I don't think it's going to go quite as long. We do have a lot of pawns out here for Autopilot. It's going to be a rather tricky defense for Chisato. And he certainly needs to keep this Khan alive if he wants to stay in this game and not take extra damage. Finally, the radar's going up over in this location, but, there's a lot of pawns to deal with. I believe that this is probably going to be threatened, maybe taken down even. But there are a lot of reinforcements coming in here from Chisato, so maybe, maybe it's just fine for now. There is a tick that has come in the back here, but not enough damage. Quick response from Chisato, moving a pawn up there to defend that. That's, radar and construction guy. But yeah, some pawns on the left, or I'm sorry, on the right as well, going to be threatening this Khan. That's certainly going to be a big deal because Chisato desperately needs those Khans to be alive. And there was a Khan that was picked off here too, I guess. I don't see a Khan in the region anymore, so that must have died. There's a Khan in the center, but like it's kind of just out by itself. And yeah, I think this is just gonna be GG here in a minute because these pawns are coming up here, taking out this location. Self-D tries to go up, but no dice. And, with all these pawns roaming around at the, the top right, we got pawns on the left-hand side, and then we got a mass of pawns coming kind of towards the right-hand side from the center. And this is certainly going to be a lot of pressure. And look at this. These 4 pawns even moving towards this Khan, are probably going to pick off this Khan as well. Chisato tries to block it with these labs, but now he's blocked his own units from helping out, and the constructor goes down. Very unfortunate there. A block is kind of nice, but at the same time, if those a few units can slip by more easily than your big army. So, I think that might have even helped out Autopilot there a little bit. And yeah, just looking at the board here, we do have a Khan on the left here. It looks like it was resurrected. But that's certainly not gonna, not gonna be enough if you're talking about all the stuff that he's lost. The fact that Autopilot has these 3 Khans out expanding, and Autopilot's just in a much, much better position here. He's going to be able to field a lot more units in the coming future here with his extra economy. And yeah, even getting like some of the wreck fields here, like towards Chisato's base, is not a good feeling. That's certainly things that the defender usually has as a to get back into the game mechanic. But when the fights happen in a little location you can't defend, like the attackers can certainly get some res spots out there, pick up those units. And I think Autopilot not only is going to have higher production, but after he picks up those wrecks, he's going to have even more units too. So I think Autopilot here is going to be closing out this game rather shortly. Even having a Khan over here in the middle is kind of nice. Building an LT, I mean, that's just a power move. You'd think maybe you'd go for the mechs, but actually the LT is a stronger move, especially in the location where it is, where it kind of just sections this point off, creates a point where, pawns can't run through as easily. So, just putting up that defense, like kind of in Chisato's base, preventing him from being able to get over here, maybe fight for the wrecks, or even like try to get his territory back and build on it. But yeah, look at that difference in income. I think Autopilot's probably going to be, like I said, closing this out pretty quickly here. But for right now, being careful about it, not just throwing his units around. If he takes a bad engagement and all these units become Chisato's, that's certainly not going to help the situation. So being very careful with how he engages. Of course, Chisato needs to be very careful as well, but one little misstep can certainly turn the tides a little bit towards, Chisato's base if Autopilot's not careful. So, that's why you see these players, not just run in there, trying to do as much damage as they can, because those wrecks play a very, very big factor here. Chisato can certainly, just resurrect the army if he gets enough resurrectors out, and then all of a sudden it makes the game really, really hard for Autopilot to close out. Autopilot does have plenty of res spots out for himself, but a lot of these wrecks are on the other side. You could potentially send some units out this way, knowing that there's some wrecks out there, but that's not on his mind at the moment. Instead, just, looking around, sharking with this gigantic ball of pawns, and, that's certainly a ball that Chisato needs to respect. So, making it so that this ball is still alive, isn't just trading with these pawns in Chisato's base. It creates this big threat in the corner that Chisato needs to respond to, needs to keep units by in order to deal with. And that allows the frontal army to grow instead of letting Chisato's forces to stack up and combine together to create a big ball for himself. So, very strong moves here from both players. Oh, it looks like, unfortunately for Zeteo, this Khan can get picked off, sniped, and that's rather unfortunate. I mean, Autopilot even taking a pretty even trade other than that, other than the constructor that was picked off. So, it's a very nice move from Zeteo here. And, there's even this group of pawns threatening the side. There's plenty of solars here, which, if those get taken out, it's certainly a big deal. But yeah, I think, at this point in time, there's just so many, groups of pawns that Zeteo needs to deal with. He can't just, like, go out and expand. There's such a heavy contain on him at the moment. Yeah, looking at it from Zeteo's point of view, I'm not sure what you do to come back, but, certainly if your opponent makes a big mistake, it is somewhat possible. But I think it's extremely unlikely at this point in time, especially out of someone of, Autopilot's caliber, certainly probably isn't going to be making those mistakes. Autopilot now switching it into an air lab, I guess, seeing the situation, realizing that, like, if I switch into an air lab, I can apply, damage or apply pressure from the air, and that causes you to have to expend or, spend money on anti-air. And if you don't have enough, then if you don't have enough, then my air units just kind of, destroy some of your economy. If you do have enough, then you probably, there's a good chance that you overbuilt that, which means now my ground forces are extra strong, right? So I think just it's a means to throw your opponent off balance a bit. Makes it very hard to, like, have exactly enough for both. But yeah, as it is, like, he is going bombers. In fact, this is an even better choice than going something like Banshees, because for bombers, like, they throw the bombs ahead of time, and they certainly have a lot more hit points. So you need more anti-air. You need that anti-air to kind of be in the front, to prevent the bombers from doing any damage. It needs to be in the front. And, at this point in time, when you don't really have, like, gigantic fields of wind turbines, a few bombers taking out the few wind turbines that you have is, a very, very big deal. And then, yeah, we do see some engagements going down here. These mexes were taken out. So, yeah, Zeteo just in a bad position, even without the bombers coming forward. The bombers are en route. So now he does have a scout. So he's going to be able to, see that there is no anti-air. And this is actually a lot of bombers. So, yeah, this is basically going to be the majority of the wind turbines going down here. And even maybe a solar, not quite yet, but yeah, anti-air is coming out. But at the same time, look at this push. We got some Centurions coming up from the center as well. So, having to deal with the bombers and the Centurions all at the exact same time is just way too much. And Zeteo taps out.
Battle ended.
So that means Autopilot's going to be advancing to the losers finals to face off against Blow Deer, and that, of course, is going to be. Well, not of course, but is going to be, a potential, well, not potential. What am I trying to say here? So that's going to be a rematch. It's going to be a rematch between these two. Autopilot got knocked down to the losers bracket, from Blow Deer. So we'll see if Autopilot's going to be able to, come back and win that series and make it to the grand finals, or not. And then whoever, wins the losers finals is going to move up to the grand finals, and they're going to be facing off against X Factor. And X Factor just took down Blow Deer. So, we'll see if that becomes a, what's it called? The word that I just said. I'm not, don't listen to me. I'm losing my mind because I'm so out of breath and tired at this point from the exhilarating cast. But yeah, it would be maybe a rematch up there as well, is what I'm trying to say. But yeah, I will be casting those games as well, so stay tuned to this channel, and that'll be coming up in the coming days. But yeah, this is Zeteo. I hope you guys enjoyed my cast. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.